Hello and welcome to Ahead of the Curve. This is your host, Jonathan Gellner, and thank you so much for joining us today. This episode is brought to you by 78 Sports. If you're a baseball coach and you're not familiar with 78 Sports, then you need to be. The guys at 78 Sports are a full design, supply, and installation team that does it all for baseball coaches and facilities. Whether you're looking to get new hitting mats, replace some L screens, put up a new batting cage, or even design a brand new indoor hitting facility, the 78 Sports team has you covered for it all. As an exclusive offer for our podcast listeners, 78 Sports is offering special pricing on your order when you mention Ahead of the Curve. Give them a call today at 844-478-TURF to get your order started. You can also check them out on their website at www.78sports.com. That's SEVENTY, 8 sports.com. On today's show, we have on Matt Swope. Matt just finished his 6th season as an assistant coach and recruiting coordinator at the University of Maryland and his 11th overall on staff. To put it lightly, Matt has been a vital part and played a key role in Maryland's rise to national prominence both as a player there and now as a coach. In 2022, they set program records for home runs, hits, runs, RBIs, slugging percentage, walks, and doubles. So on the show, we discuss what led to such a successful year this spring, and in one word, relentless. We also go over what he's planning this fall, and he takes us through what a game planning session would look like for the spring. I love this episode, and I think you will too, and here is Matt Swope. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me, man.
Sure, of course. So I am really excited to get to talk with you today. And after watching you guys, and you guys absolutely killed it offensively. You guys had an awesome year in really all aspects of it, but been a close follower of yours for a while and really excited to get to speak with you today. And, you know, after watching you guys all year long, you guys scored a ton of runs in a lot of different ways. And it just felt like you guys were just like, just the offensive culture there, it was really, really good. I'm sure it helps with really good players, with really good coaches, but take us a little bit inside, you know, what that felt like. What do you think created that? And just kind of walk us through what do you think led to such a good year?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think you got to have a good group, right? You got to have kids that want to buy in, that really believe in what you're trying to do. So I think we had a good mix of that coming off the regional year where we lost at ECU, and we had a good chunk of guys back. And just from day one, from the previous summer all the way going into the fall, the guys were just bought in. So I would say it's more of the guys, you know, putting the time in and willing to just kind of put their faith in you with that. And it just kind of took off from there.
I love hearing that. So tell us a little bit about, you know, you seem to be a guy that's forward thinking. You guys do some stuff that looks really simple. You guys do some stuff that's really complex. So, you know, we're in the period now where everybody's trying to plan out this fall. And, you know, seeing the things that you guys were able to do last year, what are some things that you want to do this fall to try and replicate a lot of that success, you know, and just, it could be, you know, just philosophy or drill work or periodization, like whatever you think is going to be helpful. But, you know, for those out planning what they're going to be doing this fall, you know, now, what were some different suggestions that you had, and then what is it going to look like for you guys?
Well, I think it's tough, right? Because anybody that would look at the numbers would be like, if you change one thing, you're crazy. So that's kind of the struggle I have is you're always evolving as a coach. You're getting better. You're trying to communicate better to your team. But, you know, you look at what we did and it's kind of like, oh, well, why would you change things? But, you know, me just being who I am, I'm always going to have a growth mindset. I'm always going to push forward. I'm always going to try to drill down on things. And for me, you know, the premise of everything I do and will never change is it's all about coaching the individual. First and foremost, what makes him tick, even down to what type of brain type he has. We have 16 different brain types that we have. And,
oh, cool.
You know, I give them personality tests, and I need to know how they receive feedback. Can they take this criticism? Maybe a way that I can communicate with them better. So for me, it always starts there where, you know, I think I kind of grew up with the same type of coach where everybody was really tough on you. And you know, just because I'm competitive, I'm going to communicate with you like that. And this is how it's going to be. You know, when it just today, it's not going to work like that. It doesn't work like that. social media, things are more transparent. People are more vulnerable or willing to be vulnerable. So it's
Mm-hmm.
my job is to conform to them to a certain extent on understanding how they're going to receive the information that I'm giving them. So that's super important. So I'm always going to drill down on the individual first, get to know them a little bit, and then I can go from there on the baseball side.
Sure. What personality tests do you guys give?
So these are, I mean, you can find them generically. So I read a book a couple years from a guy that's out in California, and he was like the godfather of trying to predict sport outcomes based off personalities.
Okay.
And while I'm sure a lot of NFL teams and all these NBA are paying for that information to try to predict that, I read it and took it more as how I'm going to communicate better with my team.
Okay.
So, you can go on the internet right now in 2 minutes and say, type in personality test and it'll give you one and then it'll spit it back what your brain type is.
Okay.
So it'll give you some feedback based on that. And then obviously you can delve into, what it is. Are you an introvert? Are you extroverted? And our society, just because we say introverted, we automatically think that they're quiet,
Mm-hmm.
which that's not really the case. They can have some extroverted type of from traits, but we just as a society hear that word and think that. So it's really detailed, it's really specific, but I'm always, even in the recruiting process, which is way too early now, which is on
Mm-hmm.
another level, but I'm delving into this stuff 3 years before they get here. That way, when they do get here, I have a really good understanding of who they are and how they're receiving feedback and what makes them tick.
Sure. No, I really like that. And are there any trends that you have found? So let's say I went on and I gave them these tests and I got their personality traits. How have you had success with knowing that, or maybe what's the line of questioning that you use that really helps get to the heart of the player? With you said there were 16, so I'm sure that there's a lot of variability in that. But you mentioned introvert, extrovert.
Yeah.
What are some advice of just like if we knew that our players were that, what would your advice be with that?
Oh, it just gives you a different way to communicate with them.
Got it.
It's basically having the answers to the test. And in the college world, I don't have time. So every second I have with my players matters. So I don't have the time for the trial and error on the feedback. I don't have the time for the trial and error on the communication. I just don't have that because it's 8 hours in the fall and 20 hours for 5 weeks. And then that's it. I don't get to sit in there like pro guys or maybe guys that come from facilities and give lessons and sit in there and talk for hours like I do with Lamont Wade. That's the difference in the relationship is being able to do that. So if I can cut down that time and understand the player better, then that allows me to communicate better from the movement side
Hmm.
or from the mental side or from things in baseball that he's not doing it. And I don't want to get too deep into it because it's very difficult, but there's a lot of science now on brain types and how and why they move. So
Gotcha.
if people wanted to go down a rabbit hole, there is a correlation between brain types and how people move, and there's been studies on that for years. So even me going down that, I think I have a good idea sometimes what I'm going to be looking at as we go.
Oh, very cool. Well, let's talk about, some of the pillars of this off season. So you get to know the players, and I know that it's a Division One school, so you guys have some really strict time restrictions. But just walk us through, how this fall is planned out. I'm like just assuming here you're going to have a team period to where you guys are on the field at the same time, and then it's usually individual periods after that. What's the plan, and like how if someone has similar time restrictions is that how do we own it, what are you guys planning on doing, and then just let us take a deep dive into that.
Yeah, so we always the first 5 weeks are individuals for us. So I know a lot of schools will go right into fall practice because then they want to kind of dive into after that the problem. I personally don't think that's the best way. I think that the first 4 or 5 weeks you have to have a foundation of what you expect from an offense, a defense, from a pitching staff, from a sign perspective, from a culture perspective. I think you need to almost teach that stuff and make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Okay.
So we do the first 4 or 5 weeks of just individuals, and that's more of a teaching period. I think it's also important that these first 4 or 5 weeks, if I have freshmen or a transfer come in, I'm not saying a word to them about their mechanics. I need to watch them for 4 or 5 weeks, their mannerisms, their adjustments, their frustrations, anything. I need to pick up on that, because if I start telling a kid a week after he gets here to start changing things, you may lose him right there, or you may set him back from a confidence standpoint. So
Sure.
I think a lot of coaches do that too early, and it's not because it comes from a bad place and they don't want to help, but I think you're going to lose kids faster like that. So the first 4 or 5 weeks, we're just teaching, implementing, setting the stage, and then when we get into the practice period, it's full bore. People know where they're supposed to be, what they're doing, what they're looking for, the culture, all those different things, and that kind of takes us almost into Thanksgiving, and then we're kind of winding down from there. There's not much from there.
No, it's really good. So on Instagram, you post a lot of different drill work videos and a lot of different things that you guys are doing. How do you balance? Because you mentioned getting to know the individual first, so I'm sure all of this is calculated on what you guys are doing. But how do you balance, the thought processes, swing mechanics, like movement prep? You guys do a lot of different things with each different player. Like, what's your process behind that? Because I would love to learn more about it.
Yeah, I think it starts with having everybody on the same page. Coach Vaughn has been great. I've been with him for 11 years at Maryland, so we came in together here under Coach Chef. So I think one, it's the cohesiveness. You can't have other coaches believe something that ends up being contradictory, which happens a lot because of egos. So I think number one, you have to be on the same page as a staff. We have a strength trainer in here now, Nate Garza, who's my first ever strength trainer that was a baseball player. And I can't tell you how much of a difference that makes if everybody's listening out there and hiring someone, in the baseball world as far as, what to do. I think he just has a different perspective on it's not siloed into what maybe like a CSCS certification would be from any sport. He understands the what it takes from a pitching, from a hitting standpoint, because he was a baseball player, and I can't tell you how much time that cuts down, because I can do move prep, I could do work in the strength training session in the morning that he implements part of the lift that I don't have to do during maybe a pre-hitting situation where it's taking up more time. So I think the communication from the staff, being on the same page with your trainer and strength trainer, allows us to kind of do that stuff at a better pace, at a quicker rate, at
Sure.
a higher efficiency. So it all starts with the whole cohesiveness in the staff for sure.
Okay. Can you, if you don't mind, take us into a conversation that you would have with him? Because I know, like, we hear that a lot, but like the execution of it is not easy because, you're on two different schedules. And if you've got more than two people involved, you're on 3 to 5 different schedules and just trying to figure out, okay, how do we make sure we're on the same page with, each of these, 40 players that you're going to have, not including POs,
Yep.
but take us through what like a conversation like that would look like with him that in this upcoming fall or even in the preseason before you guys get there.
Yeah, we're going through a week. So we
Oh, cool.
literally, yeah,
Perfect.
no, I've given a presentation at Bridge the Gap on this. So me
Mm-hmm.
and him actually gave the same presentation together. We gave it together as a strength and conditioning and hitting coach. So um, it's something you just have to be very clear on, so we're not taxing the CNS. So we're not putting ourselves into bad situations where we're doing the same movements. I'll give him a week outlook. Hey, this is going to be a higher rep day on this. So what are you doing in the weight room? So I know the heavy lift days, and he knows the high capacity days from a practice or hitting perspective. So that stuff is done before the week even starts. So there's just not a lot of hitting or pitching coaches that are going to have that conversation with the strength coach. And the strength coach is normally just very stringent on what he wants to see from a result standpoint, but we're forgetting about the performance aspect on the field. And everybody's guilty. So, we added Catapult this year for the first time, which was, it's like a wearable device for load. And I know people hate that word. It's just, no matter where you're at on that stance, the only thing I care about is performance. What's going to make the guys perform better, what's going to keep them fresh. If that's less swings and whatever it takes, I don't care. I'm not into let's just check the box to check the box. So we've always been on the same page. We just work out the week, and he knows my loads, I know his loads, and it's as simple as that from starting there. And I guarantee you, most people and most schools just don't do that.
Sure. Can you give our listeners an idea of what like a high CNS day would look like from both ends so they can go, okay, I need to just be aware of this more often?
Yeah, it may be something where he's in the weight room doing, squats or front squats or maybe some type of high output plyo stuff, where it's going to tax him a little bit. And then, I can't match that with, hey, we're going to do heavy plyo balls, hitting off the plyo balls with bats or, 100 swings off a machine. Maybe something where I'm doing med ball slams with the bat or something, or a heavy bag swing where you're really working on the core and bracing and all that stuff. So we just need to make sure that we're not doubling up on that stuff. And again, some of that is it's hard to avoid, but you can also change the volume. It just doesn't have to be completely changing the exercise. You just have to be creative with it.
Sure. No, that's really, really good. And thank you for giving us some insight behind that.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about, your prep work. And I think that this is, it seems to be a passion of yours of just like, how do we prepare the body before we hit, or maybe, your pre-BP or pre-machine or pre-hitting routines. And it seems that like you post a lot of that type of drill work on social media. So tell us a little bit about, what are some of your favorite things? What are you looking for? And how do you get guys maybe to even have, you've talked a lot about the individual process, like individual player process. So tell us a little bit about how all of that comes about and how you decide what each player needs to do.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things out there these days, and I've been down deep holes with running and all that, and guys that move on their forefeet and guys that move in their heels. So I've been down rabbit holes for years on trying to make sure that uh, I'm doing the prep work that's actually going to be right for their central nervous system, and that individual path is very difficult. So when the guys come in for the day, we actually hit. They come in, they hit with me before they go out to practice. So we have a segment where we're working on, the feels, the prep work, the time to be a little bit creative. And then when you walk outside for the day, we need to turn that on and compete. So the guys, each individual guy will have their own program, whether that's with a water bag or maybe it's just a plyo circuit. Some guys are doing a little bit more to, in their posterior chain or anterior chain. It's not one or the other. Okay. So everybody's different. So the process for that is very lengthy. What type of mover they are. It's not just based off range of motion, like a lot of maybe just physical trainers have been doing for years. It's not based off that. So it's all scientifically based off how I'm trying to understand how their body wants to move, not make them move the way my opinion or the way I want them to move. And I think that's the problem across the board is you're seeing everybody try to do the same things. And that's what our country's done for a long time with whether it's shoes. You buy a pair of shoes, you don't pick the kind of soles or cushion soles or hard soles. You don't have those options. They're kind of making you fit into that. So what I'm trying to do is just individualize it off them. And I know I'm going very deep on you right now, but this is what
Sure.
I've been trying to do for
No doubt.
for 10 or 11 years and get it right for the player, not necessarily have him fit into what I want him to do. So I'm sorry, there's no one answer, but everybody's doing different stuff based off kind of what their encoded movements are.
I gotcha. Do those stay the same throughout the year, or is it one thing that you want some variability within it?
Yeah, I'll give them some variability. So I try to what I do is, after those 5 or 6 weeks, I'll get into 2 and 3 week periods of drills and see what kind of works for them. Is it working? Is it not working? Are the cues working? Because again, just because you're trying to find an individual movement for that player doesn't mean the drills and the cues and the feels aren't just as important. They are, right? Like we have to know, hey, this is what his body wants to do. Okay, what is going to fit that mold so he understands it? And that's the coaching part that I think is missing all across the board in Major League Baseball and college and high school is that the application for data, or the application for the movement is still the most important, right? It's not the data, it's the application of how you're going to make those changes. So yes, we'll switch that every 2 or 3 weeks. They'll have probably 3 phases of that till they go into Christmas break,
Okay.
and then they come back. And my biggest thing is, I always say, is development isn't someone doing what I tell them to do. Development is them becoming their own best coach, and it always will be. So when I'm having conversations with Lamont Wade, who's coming back, yesterday or 2 days ago, and then tonight, he's not relying on me or his hitting coach with the Giants to make adjustments. That's also a problem that I feel that's kind of happening across the board with swing coaches and just whatever. It's more of a crutch instead of that person knowing in and out, what they need to do on that day.
Perfect. Great answer. So with that, you mentioned the word data, and so as a hitting guy, I'm always curious. What devices do you like? I mean, it's like you mentioned, it's all very individual based. But what are some different things that you guys have there that you use and that you like?
I don't use anything.
Okay.
To be honest with you, it's just something that you can look at the numbers, and it's easy for me to say, well, we didn't use anything, so we don't need it. No, that's not it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty well versed on the K-Vest, the Blast, all that different stuff where I've seen it, I've tried it, I've done it. And for me, we have Yakkertech, and that is the biggest, most important thing for me. And it's not because it gives me exit velocity or launch angle. It's because I can laser the strike zone. So for me, my number one will always be zone discipline. When you come in the first day, the only thing I will talk about is swinging at strikes and taking balls. And I am a savage about it. We give the guys reports every morning after the game, and I have it coded specifically. And I used to actually go back and grade it on my own by watching it, but now I don't have to because we've coded it. Was essentially, did you swing at the strikes and the pitches you should, and did you take balls? And it's always going to start there, not mechanics, not anything else. It's always going to start there. So I'm a savage most about that, and the Yakkertech has
Okay.
really helped me because I don't have to go back and physically watch and grade the games anymore. I can code it with that data and kind of give the guys a feedback on, are they swinging at strikes, and then kind of what was the result on those strikes. That's kind of important too, is them starting to understand where they're doing damage and all that. So for me, I'm not any one specific thing I'm swearing by from a tech standpoint. I
Mm-hmm.
think at Maryland too, we don't have the largest budget, so I've always had to come from being creative, thinking outside the box, kind of
Okay.
do it yourself type of thing.
Sure.
So that's probably has a little bit to do with why I don't use it as much.
No,
So
no problem at all. I love hearing that. So with that, like, let's talk about. So you've mentioned getting them to Christmas break or winter break, and then once you get back, like it's a sprint to start and to make sure that they get ready. So whenever you do flip that from okay, now we're in off season, now we're in preseason slash getting ready to perform in games. Like you feel like you did all of your I don't want to say development, but you spent a lot of time in individual development in the fall. Do you still do a lot of that in the spring, or do you flip the switch of hey, we're going at the pitcher and that's all that we're worrying about? How do you balance that if you do both? Like, walk us through just what January feels like and looks like.
yeah, I think most of the time, like in the fall, you're building the engine, and then in the spring, you're just running it, right? So I would say that yes, we still do the groups before, but they're more combined, so there's less individuality in it. There's not three groups; there may be one or two. So we're kind of all doing our work because they know what to expect, and at that point, and I'm doing it in the fall too. I'm working on mental fitness, and I call it mental fitness because it's such a big part of what's about to come from a pressure standpoint and all that. So we meditate with our hitters in the fall for 3 minutes every day before they start. Non-negotiable. We're going to do that every single
You say
day.
3 or 30?
Three,
Oh,
three
okay,
minutes.
perfect. Why three?
It's just quick, right? It's
Okay,
I don't have a lot of time. Headspace or Calm is a
sure.
great app where they have
Hmm.
guided meditation. I don't care what they did in class that day, what's going on with their girlfriend. it's stressful. There's a lot of stimulus going on, or throughout the day. So hey, let's just get our mind right and then keep going. But towards the spring, we need to understand at that point, what your routines are, how you're going to prepare yourself. Because if we're not working on the mental fitness throughout, we're opening up like at Baylor this year versus a Big 12 team. And, the freshmen and transfers are looking around like, oh crap, like what am I supposed to do today on a game day? And then I'm failing them as a coach. They don't all have to do the same things, but if we're not talking about it, if we're not preparing, and we don't know individually what we need to have in that routine, then that's my fault. So I would say, it's less about the individual mechanics of baseball. It's more about the mental fitness and preparation for what lies ahead.
Oh, I love it. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about, when you've got this offensive culture that you've built. To me, the best hitting teams I've ever been around were like they're locked in on pitches. They are communicating pitch types, and it's an iron sharpens iron type thing of like, we are going to grind this out. Like, we're not going to give in. And judging by the stats, I mean, the stats that you sent me over, you guys were like top 5 in literally everything. You set program records in just about everything. And again, that comes back to you do have good players. You guys as a coaching staff do really well. But if you had to bottle up, like just as a group, what do you feel like this group did so well? And I'm going to take this one away from you. They swung at strikes and they took balls. Like, you can't use that one because
Okay. Yeah.
I'm assuming that's a big part of it too. But like, what was that feeling like? And what was this group like?
They're just relentless. You have a group of competitors that absolutely were just relentless and didn't
Man, I love
care
that word.
if it was 4-0 or 5-0. All of a sudden, 3-run home run, 2-run home run, and we got 5 runs on the board before you blinked. And that started from the first weekend at Baylor. I mean, we were just absolutely smashing baseballs up or down, and I think that gave them the confidence. They did it in the fall, but I think it gives you the confidence when you do it in game that sets the tone for the year. That, hey man, it doesn't matter what the score is. Even in a regional championship game, we're down 9 runs and almost came all the way back and won. So that they were relentless. I think the other part of it, and I'm just going to keep going back to this, each player individually knows what they're good at. They're not trying to do too much. If they know what they're good at, even if that's a drag bunt and or lengthening and shortening the field that way, or they're a runner, or they're someone who drives runs in. If someone's really confident in what they do individually, that's going to permeate throughout the whole team, and then you're unstoppable. Then the pitching coach is saying, how do we get these guys out? So one, the relentless mentality, but two, individually, these guys knowing what they're good at and not trying to do too much is huge when you're trying to set up your offense.
No doubt. I love the word relentless.
Yeah.
And like, take us through some game planning discussions. I'm always trying to figure out ways to get better at this. And, what are some different things that you guys use? Video seems to come up quite a bit. I love being able to see a picture beforehand. But let's say you're planning a weekend series. What would the week leading up to that look like? And game planning talks beforehand, and then we'll get into some in dugout stuff too.
Yeah, man, I think this is really hard, especially with so much data these days.
Right.
I think you can be overwhelmed. And I've gone back and forth over the years, but at this point, I've never felt better about what we do. As far as we use video, we only show maybe 10 to 12 pitches. But I think what you're finding is outliers. So sorry, we're finding outliers, and with those outliers, if it's a 2-seam guy, right, like he's not going to pitch up in the zone. Okay. If it's a 4-seam guy with a high spin, he's not going to pitch down in the zone. Depending on those fastballs, his breaking ball is going to do something. So if you can start to eliminate quadrants, you can start to see where he attacks, where he executes. Then what you can do is you can fit that to the individual player's strengths. We don't have a blanket approach. I can't say, hey, everybody go backside and hunt the ball away. I can't do that if you're coaching the individual. So we know what the pitcher is trying to do. Then I can assimilate that, and the players can assimilate that into their plan. and their strengths. So I know that seems really deep, but if you do a good job on the front end, coaching them on their strengths and showing them their strengths, when you show video and data on a player, they kind of know what they should be doing in their individual plan. And sure, do they come to me and say, hey, it looks like he's, I'm going to sit breaking ball here because, he's been dumping it in versus lefties. Yes. Are you having those conversations? But, I think we've done a really good job at finding the outliers and then the kids being able to know how that fits to them specifically.
No, it's really good. So, was there ever a situation this year that you game planned for a certain guy and then it was just for whatever reason was different in the box? And if so, how did you adjust to that?
Yeah, I think you'll find that a lot, right? Like if you're perceived at a team that has power, which we did this year, a guy could have percentages of trying to do something consistently, right? But that day the pitching coach is going to decide to, hey, we're going to pitch backwards, and that happens often. You have to have the humility throughout the team to say, okay, there is a chance he's going to try to throw you differently. And there is a chance that it's not going to just go based off what the scouting report is, but you still have to swing at strikes. so we can't use that as a crutch to be like, well, you said he normally does this and today he's doing that. That comes from one of our pillars is ownership. That's not taking ownership in the fact that guy's trying to beat you. Everybody's trying to beat you and you're good. So I think that's just a communication thing and understanding what they're trying to do to you. So yeah, that's hard, right? I mean, you're going to get some different approaches sometimes, but what I found is, and I tell the guys all the time, if a pitching coach is suddenly trying to do something different versus you and what the pitcher normally does in his strengths, you chances are you already have a leg up. So, that has worked well for us. And I think in times like that, you also have to be able to understand, hey man, this guy's doing a good job today. We got to be a Swiss Army knife. We got to work that walk. We're going to steal a base or do a good job ball in dirt. You're going to drag for a hit, and then all of a sudden you hit a 2-run home run. And sometimes it just has to be like that. And that's why I think our squad was so good, because we literally could do whatever the game dictated. And when you have that freedom to be able to coach offense like that, you're going to be hard to stop.
So how did you promote that? Because I know like early in the year, it's frigid, to probably say the least. So I'm sure the ball's not leaving the yard all the time. And was that just a conversation that you guys had of, hey, we got to just take whatever the game gives us?
Yeah, I think that's how I coach in general, right? And so does Coach Vaughn. It has to be whatever it takes that day. It takes, and it could be a bunt, it could be a hit and run, it could be home run, and just because people consistently see that you hit a home runs doesn't mean that the mentality of what it takes in that moment or a tight game isn't there. So we just try to preach that every day, and I think you do that in competition. I think you create a culture and environment where guys are going at each other every single day. And when you do that, it doesn't really matter that it's not home run derby. It could be a bunt game. It could be Batia, which is like the Dominican stickball. It could be anything if you're creating a competitive culture. And I think that, Rob's a master at that. And we've done a really good job at that overall.
I love hearing that. So I did want to rewind a little bit to talk about, preseason practices. How do you get guys ready besides like, scrimmages? Is there anything in practice that you do to really try and simulate what you're going to see in a game?
Yeah, so we have the pitch sequence pitch machine where you can type in the spin rate and all that. Now this is the first year we've had it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I think you can find the data for the spin rates, but for me, there's a lot of camps on, hey, I just want to see live arm, or we're going to simulate velo on a machine. For me, even when we do the spin on the machine, it still comes down to swing decision stuff. So, I'll make sure that we're programming balls and stuff like that. And, we'll work counts. And for me, it's more like, hey, what pitch were you looking for in this count? What were you doing here? What would your mind frame? Not just, hey, let's just put it on a high spin fastball at 97 and see if you can hit it, or just a breaking ball or fastball breaking ball. We're always just trying to have them think about it a little bit, but also have a plan. So I have a love-hate with the machines. I think most coaches do.
Sure.
They just simulate something that you can't do. But I also throw a lot. I throw a ton of live arm. So, and even then in BP, I use the V Flex, which is
Okay.
it's a contraption for vision in BP, and I throw balls. So again, I know it keeps coming back to that, but for
Mm-hmm.
me, it's always going to be about the vision and the swing decision part
Sure.
over let's try to just force the velo to see if my team can hit it.
Okay. So besides the V Flex, how do you help guys? Like if I came to you and I said, Matt, like I don't know how to teach the vision side of it. I think the V Flex is a really good one, but how would you like coach me up on how I can get better at it?
Yeah, I don't. That's a debate, right? I don't know if you can. I'm just going to be honest with you. I've cared about it for 10 years. This is the first year we brought in an ophthalmologist that specifically works with sports vision. We had everybody assessed. We had a program, and I don't know. I just can't give you that answer. I think the jury's out. Like I think there's camps where people say, "Well, man, like Lamont Wade, he's just different because he doesn't swing at balls." So we try to train it, but I don't have a specific answer for you on when reality or
Okay.
whatever else is
Sure.
going on. I just don't. I mean, I've gotten so deep into your spatial neurons turn off during VR, certain amount of them. So I can see both camps, but I as soon as I have the answer, I may make money on it.
Sure.
But I
So
just, yeah, I don't know about the vision piece. I just something that I think the reason why I really like the V Flex stuff is because you don't have to talk about it and it doesn't take time. So they have things that you can flip or throw through, and the guys are hitting and taking BP or flips or whatever anyway. So if that's something that anything that can be integrated in your normal work without taking separate time to set up or do, I think it can't hurt, you know?
sure. No, so I'll rephrase the question with this one. So let's say you have a player who is like 0 for 3 with 3 punch outs, and he's like Matt, I've got nothing. Help me out. Like I can't see this guy. I'm not seeing it very well. This has come up a few times, and I'm like, okay, like you can ask questions, but at the end of the day, it's like, man, like that's a really hard one to answer. So I would love some help with that.
Can you pinch hit?
Yeah, that's great. That's
I'm
nice.
just kidding. I'm just
Sure.
kidding. I think then you have to simplify the approach, right? Most of the time, then the guy's spinning. He's not thinking about anything else other than striking out, right? So we're going to try to simplify it by saying, okay, you are only going to sit this pitch, whether it be breaking ball or fastball. You're only swinging at this pitch, and if most of the time it's a mental thing, it's not a physical thing. Because by him saying I just don't see it means that he's either guessing or making decisions too early, or he's mentally spinning, or all those other things.
Okay.
So maybe it's something where you're trying to get him to drag. Maybe it's something where, and if he's not a dragger, maybe you're picking some specific thing of hunting a part of the baseball.
Okay.
Your brain
Yeah.
can't work multitasking in those situations. So, me getting him to focus on one singular task and that is it will give him the mental freedom, hopefully, to do whatever he has to do. So,
Sure.
I
No,
would
great
I would
answer.
say it doesn't really matter what it is as long as you're giving them one singular task.
Sure. Great answer. So then I've got one more for you in season, and that's with players that aren't playing every day and how we keep them like ready.
Mhm.
And I think that's always the toughest one, right? It's like the guy that may play once or twice a week. What's Have you found success in helping those guys? Because it's not easy, and you want them to be as prepared as possible when their opportunity is called, but you might not know when that is. What's your advice there?
To me, paying attention is a skill. To me, that's non-negotiable. So there's anywhere from 30 to 50 at bats that you can watch in the dugout a day. So we have two charts, and I know charts are, kind of annoying for some people, but I make our guys that are hitters that aren't in the game do those charts,
Okay.
albeit something like a first pitch chart, uh, tendency chart, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And some guys will use that are really cerebral in the lineup. Most won't. but what it does is that it keeps those guys engaged and locked in. So that when I go up to them and I'm asking them a question, they're mentally there. And I've probably had 3 freshmen in 11 years make an impact. So if they're just sitting around and wasting time and you're not giving them avenues to grow, then that's on me. So I think they can get the mental at bats. There's charts you could do to keep them engaged. And then we do live at bats once a week. So we'll always have pitchers that aren't necessarily uh, getting a ton of innings, and we're doing live at bats in a game type situation at least once a week. And those are all the guys that aren't playing. So I think that's a way where you can form that towards, hey, this is your chance here. You're treating this just like a game. And there's plenty of times that guys end up getting at bats based off that, or end up traveling
Mm-hmm.
that didn't and end up playing. Like we
Right.
we we
Oh yeah.
circulated 3 different freshmen in the DH role, and one finally took hold of it. But it was coming a lot from that. So and I think that with the live at bats and the other stuff in the dugout, they don't have that mental pressure of just feeling like they have to hit a home run in BP every day, because that's not going to be productive for them either.
Sure.
So just trying to encompass all that different stuff, I think, has been really helpful for our young guys. I think a part of that too is just letting them go play in the summer. Like,
Okay.
hey, go get away from me. Don't send me video. I'm not gonna break down your swing.
Sure.
Go figure it out. And if you need me, that's different. I will always be here for you, but it's not going to be a daily thing where we're talking about this, that, and the other thing. I want you to go apply what you've learned, but at the same time, figure yourself out a little bit, because it's always going to come down to more of the adjustments from your perspective and the mental aspect than it is anything else.
Yeah, and then I mean, like you mentioned, there's going to be guys that don't start the year that end up finishing the year in a vital role. And I could think of a couple off the top of my head. Do you think
Hmm.
communication and like being in it with those guys and like, hey man, we got to be ready for a chance because it's going to come, and if it comes, I need you to be ready, and just making sure, because I I think we all, all as coaches, we at some point in our career we weren't good enough to make the next level. So I hope that we remember what it was like to be a bench player. And I think that those were the most vital for me, of just like encouragement. Don't let me rot at the end of the bench. Like, give me something. And I think that has been very helpful, especially as an assistant coach, that I tried and look for those conversations. I mean, you got anything on that?
I think, what I always try to keep in my mind, the back of my mind, to be humble, is I'm only good as my 18th hitter.
I
Uh,
like that.
and that reminds me to make sure that I'm coaching and paying attention to everyone. Uh, and that will be counterproductive to what a lot of people do with the 80-20 or the 20-80 and all that different stuff. I've heard all that, and that's fine, right? But I had a freshman this year that was struggling in the fall, assimilating into class, and there's all these life things that are just going on, and I took the time in a few instances to be there in a different way from baseball, and didn't start off in the spring great, and it was some of the same stuff, and then all of a sudden he's growing daily, he's feeling a tick better, he's doing the things from a mental perspective, and he ends up with 9 home runs and 70 at bats as a freshman. So that's something that I'll always pay attention to. Maybe like a Ben Cowles, where 2 years ago nobody even knew who he was, and had this potential, was really struggling, and was hitting eight for us. And then because of all that work, he hits 18 home runs that year and is drafted by the Yankees. So I always try to just keep that in mind, that that's not the easy thing to do, and it doesn't mean that you're gonna spend 2 hours extra with your 18th hitter. But if you approach it mentally like that, and try to always check in and check yourself on, are you doing everything across the board that you are for your top three, then I think you're going to be able to move the needle or have more of those instances from the guys at the bottom.
No, really good. Well, and a lot of those times they're your younger players, and they'll
100%.
remember that, and it's a opportunity that to make those connections, because when they do get older, they're like, hey man, like he was in it with me whenever I was the 18th hitter, or whatever. And I think that that's really good.
100%. They're also talking to the young guys. So when they
Mm-hmm.
become old,
Sure.
you have that culture where it's not all relying on me. And now all of a sudden I'm looking in the corner and these guys are doing it for me. And that's when
Mm-hmm.
you feel really good about the situation and what's going on. And that's hard, man. That's why the continuity. Me and Rob have been here together for 11 years, from
I
being
love it.
young and being older and growing together, and good, bad, and different. But that's what's coming the other side out of it now more times than not. So I'm really proud of that.
Oh, that's great. Well, I got a couple more questions before we go. And the first one is, what is the latest thing that you've learned that's made you a better coach?
Well, just getting back more into the science of the brain types and the movement stuff. I think that stuff has really helped me not just try to make everybody do something with the back foot or the hands or this that. Like some guys are gonna pronate, some guys are gonna supinate, some guys are going to swivel the back leg. Some people like their balance more on their toes. There's all these different things that I'm being exposed to that maybe 5 years ago I definitely would have been more open to. I would have just tried to fit people more into categories. So that stuff has definitely helped me be more open minded, which I think coaches always have trouble with. Is be willing to be open minded and again just do what's best for the player. So definitely down more of that rabbit hole where I'm just trying to continue to grow to help the individual be better.
Sure. I hope that we all are. The next one is, what's a drill or competition that your players love that we can steal from you?
Oh, a drill or a competition? I think just putting environments out on the field, no matter what it is, whether it's a bunt game or something from a hitting situation. I don't have any world renowned something that somebody hasn't put uh, that hasn't put on the internet already. I'm definitely not going to be that innovative, but I think when you create a culture on the field, whatever it is that you're competing for that day, I think the guys do like the Batia because it's so funky. Uh, People can look that up. It's the Dominican stickball with bottle caps,
Okay.
and
I'll
it's
put a
a
link down
specific,
in the show notes.
yeah, it's just a specific type of game where it's like wiffle ball but except on steroids. So I think sometimes you just need to get the guys out of themselves, from any perspective. And when you just see them relax a little bit and have fun with it, you'll start to see a little bit more athleticism and a little bit less technical thinking, which I think too many players have these days. With all the information. So that's definitely something I enjoy where they can still compete and try to make some adjustments, but have fun with it too. So,
No doubt. I love that. Last one I've got for you is, what are some resources that you feel like have made you a better coach?
oh, resources. I think there's from a culture perspective, definitely making sure that you're reading, or if you don't like to read audio books, stuff like Can't Hurt Me, the David Goggins stuff, some Navy SEAL stuff. I think it's always important to not copy people, but you have to understand as a coach and be authentic. And if you're just trying to copy people, you're going to be in trouble. So you have to have the knowledge of what's been done, and then try to make it your own. So I think there, from a culture piece, you need to do that. And Rob's a master at that, and we've all delved into that. From a baseball perspective, just find. I think young coaches should have two or three mentors. Uh, guys that they trust, guys that they can go to. Whether it's Donnie Ecker for me for the Rangers, Bleak with 108, Joey, with the farm system, guys like that I of course don't agree with everything, but I know I can call and say that, and then they will be open minded. They won't say no because it happens, and I think that's a problem what we have going on. So I think you need to have some resources from the culture, but you also, younger coaches and even older coaches, need to have two or three mentors that they can just call on the phone and have a conversation with, and uh,
Absolutely.
good, bad, and different. So
That's great. So, Matt, man, I can't thank you enough for all that you shared with us today. You absolutely you rocked this conversation, and you were very concise. You were very well spoken, and you were very thought out, with your process. And you can tell you have a love for your players, and so I just I want to share my thoughts with you before you go. But I do want to give you the opportunity to, is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners before you go? Anything that we didn't hit on, or anything that we're passionate about that you want to leave with our listeners before we end this thing?
No, I just always try to tell young coaches to be authentic, be you. There's things that have shaped you in your life that nobody else has been through, and that's always going to make you who you are. So you can take from smart coaches, smart books, smart this, that, and the other thing, publications, but you always have to assimilate into who you are. So for me, it's always telling young coaches, or even maybe some older ones that have maybe lost their way, is making sure that you're being authentic, because at the end of the day, that's what kind of shapes us and defines us. So that's really important to me.
Thank you so much for listening to Ahead of the Curve. If you would do us a huge favor, leave a rating or review wherever you are listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone and tag us on social media. That would help us so much with growing the show and helping others to stay ahead of the curve.